Hello my sweet friends, welcome back to another video. We are here with my April wrap up. I honestly had the best month in April just overall. Like, life was just so fun. I had a bunch of trips, it was my birthday. I spent a lot of time with family and friends this month and it was really great. But not only did I just have a great month in general, I also had a really great reading month. I just read a lot of books that I really enjoyed and just had so much fun reading these books. So to give you some quick stats, I read 12 books, which is actually my most books in a month read so far this year. I read 9 fiction, 3 non-fiction, 1 DNF. All of my non-fiction are Christian non-fiction. I'll do those at the end. And I think I only have 1 5-star read this month, but I also have a very high 4.5 stars. So let's get into it. Starting off, the first book that I read was Love at First Sight by Anna E. Collins. This is probably one of my favorite covers on my bookshelf. It's a new-ish release. I honestly haven't heard anything about it, but I just came across it in BW one day, and when I saw the cover I was like, I need that in my life. So I bought it on a whim and I did enjoy it. It was a lot of fun, but it definitely wasn't like my favorite book ever. I honestly feel like I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this, which is kind of exciting because I feel like a lot of the books that I read are recommendations that I get from other people and books that are circulating on BookTok or BookTube or Bookstagram. And so it's kind of fun to go into something when you just have no idea, you have no expectations and nothing really clouds your view. I rated this 3 stars. So we have our main character, Danny, who is an interior designer. She works at this big firm that has a lot of different types of people working there. So interior designers, architects, anyone in that kind of field of work. And she recently ended her engagement because she found out her fiance was cheating on her with the real estate agent that they used to buy the house. So obviously she ditched him, which good for her. But kind of as an act of revenge, I guess, she buys the empty lot that is next to her fiance's new house that I think is like a lake house or something. It apparently has a beautiful view. She buys this empty block of land and she decides to build a spite house. So she wants to build an Airbnb that she'll be able to rent out and make money from, but it will also block the view of her fiance's house, like his beautiful view that he has out the back of his house. That would be blocked by the Airbnb that she wants to build. And she also thinks it would be fun to kind of design it and like fill it with all of his least favorite things or things that would annoy him, which great concept, so fun. But in order to do this, she needs the help of an architect that works at her firm who is kind of just known for being grumpy and mean and strict and just kind of like not the nicest guy. And of course, you can probably guess what happens. Kind of grumpy sunshine vibes, workplace romance vibes. I think if you liked The Hating Game, you'd probably quite enjoy this if you like the environment of that and the workplace element of it. Like I said, I did enjoy this. There were a lot of cute moments and it was fun and enjoyable, but it just didn't really stand out to me and I didn't get really attached to the characters at all. I feel like if I was trying to pitch this to you, it would be, just say you're going on a vacation and you want a book that is lighthearted and fun and you'll be able to just like pick it up every time you're lying by the beach or by the pool or something, but it's not gonna like rip your heart out. Just your classic workplace rom-com. Next we have Without Merit by Colleen Hoover. I've heard a lot of people say that they don't like this book, which is very interesting to me because I thoroughly enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, but I will say that this is definitely not a classic Colleen Hoover novel. I feel like in this book you don't really get attached to the characters the same way that you usually do in Colleen Hoover books, and this one doesn't shatter your heart in the same way. It's not an absolutely heartbreaking love story at all. I would say this is much more of a YA contemporary. In this book we have Merit, who is 16 or 17 and she's just kind of struggling with life right now. She's not really motivated to do anything. She doesn't really know where she's going in life, and she also has a very interesting family. They are very dysfunctional. It's a very interesting dynamic. The best way that I could describe all of the characters in this book and even this book as a whole is just very odd, very unconventional, very just random. I don't understand how Colleen Hoover managed to write a book with such a deep underlying message that is still so weird. This book focuses a lot on family and family dynamic, sibling dynamic, mental health, just kind of figuring out who you are as a teenager, lots of things like that. Definitely don't go into this thinking that it's going to be a romance. There is romance involved, but it's definitely not the main plot or the main point of this story. I think the discussions in this book around mental health were really good, and I think that if I had read this as like a 16 or 17 year old, it would have hit me even harder. So I definitely still do recommend this. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, but also like I said, expect a very odd story, odd characters, dysfunctional family dynamics, and also not a very distinct plot. plot. Next we have Convenience Store Woman. It kind of matches my jumper a little bit. I picked this up in a bookstore in Sydney when I was visiting over Easter, and I read it in like 2 days. It is a very small book and I really enjoyed this. I got this recommendation from Jack Edwards, but I know it's quite a popular book now. This was very different from the normal books that I read. I don't even know the genre of this. Literary fiction? Let me check. Contemporary fiction, Japanese literature. I feel like I'm not intelligent enough to be able to really describe this book well. I think if you want a more in-depth, thought-provoking kind of review, maybe check out Jack Edwards' review of this because I really liked what he had to say about it. But we have our main character. She is a 36-year-old single woman who has only ever worked in a convenience store. I think she's worked there for 18 years and she is really, really good at her job and she loves it. She absolutely adores it. But everyone in her life is kind of getting concerned for her because she's 36, she's not married, she hasn't got kids, she doesn't seem to want a different job or a real career, and they're kind of showing their concern to her and she's confused because she's like, but I'm happy doing what I'm doing. But realizing that other people are starting to show this concern, she tries to adapt and change herself to be able to fit into this cookie cutter kind of version of herself that people will accept. And it's kind of heartbreaking to read this happen because you see this woman who is so full of purpose and so happy, just living a very simple life, try and turn herself into something that other people will be happy with even though it doesn't really satisfy or fulfill her. I don't want to ruin the story, but I really liked the ending and I think the book as a whole is just so thought-provoking in a very subtle way. Like not that much really happens in this book, yet I found myself so attached to our main character and rooting for her so passionately because I wanted her to kind of have those realizations that she could do whatever she wanted to do despite what everyone else wanted her to do. And it's one of those things where you start reflecting and you're like, how much am I behaving in this way to fulfill a societal standard when I might be happy and more fulfilled living in a different way? But I could honestly go on about this for a very long time. I will say if you like a plot-heavy book, don't pick this up. If you want something that you just can't put down, do not pick up this book. It is much more of a self-reflection, thought-provoking, just quality literature. So do with that what you will. I think some people will love this. I understand that it's not for everyone. I personally really enjoyed my experience reading it, but it's not going to be at the top of my list to recommend to other people because I think it's going to be a pretty personal experience. Okay, then we have the next 3 books in the ACOTAR series. You guys know that I read the first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, last month in March, and I gave that book 4 stars. I would say I had no idea what I was reading for the first 50% of it. I didn't really know what was going on, and then the second 50% of it was just so good and really intriguing to me. But a lot of people said, oh my gosh, the first book is basically trash compared to the rest of the series, and I was really confused because I genuinely enjoyed the first book, or at least like the second half of it. But then I picked up ACOMAF, or A Court of Mist and Fury, and now I completely understand why everyone said that to me. A lot of people also said that this book specifically is just the best one in the series, and I do agree. This was my only 5-star read for the month of April. It was just so freaking good. I've put off this series for such a long time because 1, I'm not the biggest fantasy reader. 2, they are chunky books. And 3, a lot of people just talk about them for their smart. And I just want to talk about those things for a second. First of all, I think I'm becoming a fantasy girly, especially after this series. I'm so excited to get my hands on so many more fantasy books and especially fantasy series. Second of all, yes, these books are chunky, but I get it. I understand why Sarah J. Maas made the books this big because the plot is so detailed. There is so much foreshadowing. There is so much symbolism. There is so much that you get little tiny sneak peeks of earlier in other books that will pop up in later books. Like there is so much detail in these books that I just cannot get over. But also there is so much found family, and I freaking love found family. I love it when you start a book and you have a broken character and they're just kind of sad and lonely, and by the end of the book or by the end of the series they are surrounded with people who love them. They have this beautiful family that is usually like friends, not really actual family, and they just feel so like happy and fulfilled. It's just, I don't know, there's something about it that I just cannot get over. And this series is the epitome of found family. So if you love found family, you need to read this. Third of all, yes, these books do include smart. I'm not going to pretend they don't, but they're not just straight smart. I feel like so many people describe this series to me as like, oh my gosh, it is just spice upon spice, blah, blah, blah. And you guys know spice is not really my thing. I usually tend to skip over it, avoid it. I don't go into books that are labeled or marketed as just like smutty books. But I feel like marketing this as like fairy smut is kind of a discredit to to the rest of it because, like I said, there is found family, there is incredible plot, there is so much attention to detail. The world building is phenomenal. There is so much more to it than the spice. I straight up skip over the spice because it's just not for me, and I still adored this series. So loved this book, gave it 5 stars. Then I picked up A Court of Wings and Ruin. I gave this 4.5 stars. I feel like I just really loved the tension and kind of like the love story that unfolded in this one. And then obviously that love story was kind of established by the time you got to this one, but this was still so good to me because we got so much more detail about the rest of the characters. This goes a lot more in depth about the sisters and the sister stories. There's also a lot more politics involved in this one, but I personally really enjoyed that because I was here for the plot and for the characters. So the plot was probably a bit more heavy in this one. I personally liked that. I know a lot of people don't, but I really enjoyed this. And then we have A Court of Frost and Starlight, and I rated this 4 stars. It is just a little novella, so I still thoroughly enjoyed this because we just got to see a little bit more about the other characters. We got to see Farah kind of step into her power, get a little bit more comfortable with herself, go back to some other things that she used to love that she wasn't able to really do during the big political war situation in the other books. And if you guys don't know much about the ACOTAR series, basically the first book as well as these 3 mainly focus on Farah and her love interests. And so you could just read the first 4 books and like kind of be done with the series if you wanted to be. But the next books after that, as far as I'm aware, please correct me if I'm wrong, are all going to be about the like side characters. I don't even want to call them side characters because they're so well developed even in these books that I can't even imagine to think of them as side characters. But yeah, the other books in this series, there's only one out so far, A Court of Silver Flames, which I'm hoping to read during May. Those are my thoughts on the ACOTAR series. I thoroughly enjoyed, and I did not expect to enjoy them as much as I did, but they were just stunning. I feel like the lighting has changed, so I apologize if it has. April was also my first month having my Kindle, and I have been loving it. I talked a little bit more about it in my last video, which was my May reset. I have a little favorite segment, so if you want to hear me talk about my thoughts on my Kindle, feel free to check that video out. But all of the books that I read on my Kindle this month were from Kindle Unlimited. The first one was To Love, Jason Thorne by Maise, and I did not love this. I gave it 3 stars. I didn't think it was necessarily bad, but it was just a bit of a letdown to me. You guys know I love romance, I do, but I like a plot-heavy romance. I prefer there to be something actually going on in the story besides romance. Like if the whole plot is just 2 people falling in love and that's the only thing you've got going on, I'm bored. Like there needs to be something else going on. I also think I prefer romance books where they don't get together until the very end because sometimes I get bored once the couple actually gets together. In this book we have Olive, who is a writer. She's like just finished college, I think. And we have Jason, who is a movie star, but a long time ago. They were like childhood friends, kind of. Jason was Olive's brother's best friend, if that makes any sense. But they grew up, they lost touch, and then they come back into each other's lives because some company has bought the rights to make a movie of a book that Olive has written, and Jason Thorne has been casted in that movie. So they come back into contact, and what do you think happens? Obviously they fall in love. But that was like literally the whole plot. They were just like falling in love. There was also quite a lot of spice. I feel like the first half was quite interesting because there was a bit more plot involved, and as soon as they actually got together I was like kind of bored. So I wouldn't not recommend it, but I wouldn't go out of my way to recommend it. Then I read Flow by Kennedy Ryan, I think, and I rated this one 2.5 stars, which is my lowest rating of the month. This book is actually a novella, and it's like a prequel novella. So I think the series is 3 books total. This one is the first one. It's a prequel to the other 2 books that are a lot bigger. I actually really like the idea of the first book kind of being like a prequel, kind of being a novella, because you can read like 150 pages and decide if you actually want to commit to the full series. So I love the idea of it, but for me, I read the novella and I just wasn't hooked, and I honestly can't tell you why. I enjoyed the characters. I thought they were really interesting. I liked that they had great backstories, and I liked watching this 1 week of these 2 characters starting to fall in love. But there was just nothing about it that really spoke to me, that really stood out to me, and nothing that made me want to commit to the rest of this series. So I don't think I will. But in saying that, I wouldn't not recommend it again. I just think it's one of those books that just isn't for me, but I love that I was able to read 150 pages and decide that and be like, okay, I'm not going to commit to the rest of this. I didn't necessarily dislike it. It was just kind of average to me. And then my last Kindle book was Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. And this was a 4.5-star read for me. This was so stinking good. And I'm really glad that I enjoyed it because I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. I feel like I've just heard so much hype about it recently. And often when that happens, I feel like my expectations get lifted too high and I read the book and I get disappointed because it's not as good as I thought it would be. It is definitely a more lengthy romance. I think it's over 500 pages, but let me tell you, I flew through this. I think I read it in like 2 or 3 days. 4 days, a lot quicker than I thought I would get through it because I'm not necessarily a fast reader, I don't think. But it was one of those books where you could read 20 pages and it feels like you've read 5. If for some reason you haven't heard about this book, which I'd be shocked because I feel like it's just been plastered over the internet lately. So we have our main character Naomi, who has a twin sister called Tina, hope that's right, and Tina has an 11-year-old daughter, and Tina texts Naomi being like, you need to come help me. Naomi shows up to help Tina. Tina ditches Naomi with her 11-year-old daughter that Naomi didn't know existed, and she flees town in Naomi's car. So now Naomi is stuck in a small town that she doesn't know, looking after her niece that she didn't even know existed. And Naomi is also trying to kind of escape a situation, bad relationship kind of thing in her hometown. So Naomi's got a lot going on, really. But basically it's just a story about Naomi kind of finding her feet and kind of starting fresh in a small town. She also meets a guy. It's a bit of a Grumpy Sunshine situation. I wouldn't say I love Grumpy Sunshine. I don't avoid it, but I don't look for books that have Grumpy Sunshine. I feel like sometimes it's done like in a way where I'm like, why are you attracted to this man? He's literally just mean. Like they're so grumpy to the point of just being annoying. And sometimes the sunshine is so like happy and like toxic positivity to the point of being annoying. But I feel like in this book, it was done very well. It was a very good level of Grumpy Sunshine in my opinion. So we have Grumpy Sunshine. We have kind of like a single parent trope, but it's like a niece, small town romance. There's a little bit of a love triangle. There's also a really solid plot because Tina, like the evil twin sister, is still causing havoc, and they're also trying to figure out like what they're supposed to do with the 11-year-old daughter and like who's gonna look after her and all that sort of stuff. So there's still stuff going on in the background like plot wise, so it still keeps you interested, but at its core it's really a romance. But yeah, I just really thoroughly enjoyed it. There were a few parts that I wasn't obsessed with and a few things that slightly annoyed me, which is why I gave it a 4.5 instead of a 5. But I really liked so many aspects of this book and I definitely think it's worth the read. I actually did order myself a physical copy of it because I liked it enough to have it on my bookshelf, even though I read it on my Kindle. But I want to be able to lend it out to friends and stuff because I think it's going to be one that I want to reread in the future, and also I want to lend out to friends. But those are all of my fiction reads. And then quickly, as for non-fiction, this is my DNF for the month, which I'm kind of shocked about. I thought I would thoroughly enjoy this one and it just wasn't for me. I got halfway through, so I gave it my best shot. I really tried to like this, but I just couldn't get into it. This is Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I think the reasons I didn't like it was, one, I just like couldn't really relate to any parts of her story. She is a lot older, but yeah, I just like couldn't kind of relate to anything that she was really talking about. And the other thing that I didn't love about this was it just felt kind of messy in terms of structure. I'm assuming it was kind of supposed to be a bit arty, like a bit creative in terms of its structure, because it didn't follow any sort of like timeline. Like we were like flashing to when she was 30 and then she'd talk about things where she was 23 or a child or something like that. But I just found it kind of hard to follow. But I felt like I was forcing myself to finish it for the sake of finishing it, and I was just like, what's the point of that? So I think this one's just not for me. But also when I posted about it on my Instagram asking you guys what your thoughts are if you had read it, I would say like 50% of people said they couldn't get into it, didn't enjoy it, couldn't finish it, and the other 50% of people were like, I was obsessed with this changed my life, like incredible, amazing. So it seems like it's just one of those books where you either click with it or you don't, and I think I just personally don't click with it. Then I read Crazy Busy by Kevin Deyoung. I love this. This is a reread for me. I gave it 4 stars. If you like To Hell with the Hustle or Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, any Christian nonfiction that talks about hustle culture, this is definitely the book for you. It's also very short, so if you don't really enjoy reading that much but you think this is a topic that you would like to have more knowledge on or like to learn about a little bit more, I think this is the perfect book. I just think it is really well done in this book and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I said, it's a reread for me. I think I'll probably reread it again in a few years because it has so many great reminders, but great book. And then I read another very small, very small Christian nonfiction book, and it's called If I Were God, I'd End All the Pain by John Dickson. I bought this years ago and I just never read it, which I don't really know why, but I saw it on my bookshelf a couple weeks ago and I was like, I want to read that. It's pretty self-explanatory. It says struggling with evil, suffering, and faith. So just the concept of why would a loving God allow pain? Why would a loving God allow suffering? Which is definitely a concept that I have personally really struggled to understand. So this is a very helpful book. Like I said, very short. So if you are interested in this topic, I think this book does a really great job of explaining it. I don't know if I've already said this, but I gave it 4 stars as well. I just really loved it, and I think I will also come back to this many times over the next few years. And then the last non-fiction book that I had is called Revelation, The Triumph of Christ. I don't have the author written down here on my list, but I'll try and leave it down below. And it's basically just a book about Revelation. I've read a few books about Revelation over the past like 6 months or so, and I would say this is probably my favorite one I've read so far. I think it's the most beginner friendly. So if you're a Christian who struggles with the concept of Revelation, the book of Revelation, you're intimidated by it, I think this book specifically is super helpful because they explained it in a really digestible way. So definitely recommend this. I think I gave this again 4 stars. So really enjoyed this book. It is definitely like beginner. Like it's really just like these are the verses and this is what they mean. Revelation is really something you can delve very, very deep into, and this is not the book that does that, but for someone who's still trying to grasp the concepts and just like the chapters and verses themselves, it was really great for that. So thoroughly enjoyed that. But those are all the books that I have to talk about from this month. If you guys want to hear about my May TBR, I will link it down below. I uploaded that last week so you can see what I'm trying to read in the next month. Hopefully May is as good as April, because April was just a phenomenal reading month. I just had so much fun, and I honestly have a great feeling about May as well. So we'll see how we go. As always, if you want to keep up to date with what I'm reading in real time, I'm always posting on my Bookstagram, which is just rach.reads. I'll put it on the screen and also link it down below for you guys if you want to follow along there. But I would love to hear about how your reading month was in April and also your reading plans for May. If you read any of the books that I talked about today, I would love to hear your thoughts as per usual. But I love you guys so much. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye.